Hello wonderful people, welcome to another video. In this episode I'm going to be discussing my M6 Mark II. It's been coming up to about a year since I bought it, and I just want to go through a few positives and negatives that I've found over that time and answer the ultimate question: has this lived up to my expectations? So to answer the ultimate question, yes, it has lived up to my expectations. I wanted a camera that could do pretty much everything. I wanted a camera that was very competent as a photography tool for taking photos. And yes, it is an APS-C sensor. That does limit it somewhat in some situations. However, with its high megapixel count and its really good image processing, I have really not found that this camera has been limiting my skill set at all. If anything, my skill set is limiting what the camera can do, as it does continue to surprise me. But there's more to it than that. And it's not all roses. There are good and there are bad. So I want to go through a few of those things with you now, the bad and the good, so that you can make a more informed decision if you're looking at the M6 Mark II as a possible choice. Okay, let's start with the things I don't like about this camera. Firstly, the flip-up screen. It's not a bad thing. For just generally vlogging, it's okay. But with a flip-up screen, you are limited. If I'm shooting in vertical, especially for photography, less for video, because I don't really shoot vertical for video. If it's low to the ground, I can't see the screen easily. I have to either lie on the ground or sometimes use my phone as a mirror. The way around it is to use the companion app. I have used the companion app when I've had this low to the ground to just see what it is, adjust the settings, take the shot. It's more an inconvenience than it is a massive negative. I do like that the flip-up screen tends to be a little bit more robust over long term, which means that it's less likely to break on me. But a flip-out screen would have just made this like a 10 out of 10 for me, I think. Lack of weather sealing. The 90D has weather sealing. I almost bought the 90D. At the time though, I couldn't justify an extra $400 for basically the same camera in terms of function set. I have got around it using one of these things with the cord and the cable, and it goes around. You've probably seen these in some of my videos. I'll get rid of that. That bag has saved me. I've been through waterfalls, I've been in torrential rainstorms, and not once has it affected my camera because of putting that plastic over it. However, I wish it was weather sealed. I wish that I could care a little bit less about where I put it in the environments I took the M6 Mark II in. There's always that little bit of worry that something's going to get into the wrong place. My phone is much smaller than this, yet it's waterproof to 30 meters, so I don't understand why this can't be weather sealed. Something I wish Canon will work on their smaller mirrorless cameras. Dynamic range. Shadows aren't too bad on this, I find, for dynamic range. Generally, if I overexpose an image, I can bring it down, not have the noise in the shadows, but also have the detail. That works better than bringing the shadows up, where you generally introduce a little bit of noise from the M6 Mark II sensor. But the dynamic range in the highlights particularly isn't as great. I quite often, because I tend to overexpose every shot, find that more often than not, if a highlight's blown out, it's done. That photo's rubbish, I can't use it. Exposure bracketing can help with that. You can do one stop above, one stop below, one in the middle. You can set it up to do that. A bit more work going through your photos to find the one that works, but that can save you. So it is a workaround, it is a setting in the camera. I'm a run and gun photographer. I like to take a snap, move on to the next thing. So the fact that if the highlights are blown out, the photo's useless is a bit of a problem. I just wish the highlights retained a little bit more information than they do. There are two custom settings on the dial on this camera. They are only for photography. On the Sony, I believe you can set the custom functions to being video or photo. I wish Canon would implement that here. I don't see why they couldn't implement it through a firmware patch potentially, but if the C1, C2 custom settings could be photography or video, that would be a game changer. If I could leave one of those settings, C1 or C2, set up for using 120 frames per second, and I can just flick that dial and I'm ready to go, that would be a game changer. It would be amazing. Please, Canon, if you see this, please change the custom functions to work for video or photo, not just photo. Which really leads me on to the 120 frames per second setting in the menu. I have my custom menu set up to go there as quick as possible, but even then, I'm pressing the menu button, I'm going to shooting mode, I have to go enable high frame rate mode, and then I have to go OK, and then I'm ready to go. It's 3 or 4 steps, but why can't it just be on the dial? make life so much easier. Not to mention when you go out of 120 frame per second mode, it defaults to 60 or 50, not 24 or 25 where you shoot in most of the time. Why does it default to the higher frame rate? It baffles me. You should just go back to whatever it was previously, right? Now onto functions, the things that really bother me. The touch shutter. On the back of the screen, down on the bottom left-hand corner, there is a toggle for the touch shutter. If you don't know what the touch shutter is, basically it means that wherever you touch on the screen, not only will it focus on that point, it'll straight away trigger the shutter. So I can see where that's beneficial in some sporting scenarios maybe, but I don't know any photographer that would use the touchpad for the shutter. I don't know why it exists. I really don't think there's a need for it. However, the worst thing is you turn it off in the menu system, it's not really off. The toggle's always on the screen. If you've got a screen that has info and has the quick menu up, it's always there, which means you can always potentially tap it by mistake, especially if you're trying to focus in a lower corner or you just hold it wrong with the palm of your hand touches it. The amount of times I've gone to take a photo just to focus and it snapped a photo and it's a terrible photo, and by the time I've toggled that off and gone back into what I need it to shoot in, it's too late, I've missed the shot. But it's just annoying. I want to take it off the screen. If I turn it off in the menu, it should not show up anywhere. It should not exist in my world. Now, the most annoying thing and the thing that's lost me the most photos, and yes, I understand I could turn this off in the menu, it's kind of on me a little bit, but the flash button on the back, the little circular disc you press to turn the flash on and off. It's a toggle. Why is it so easy to press? The amount of times I've missed a shot because I've squeezed a little bit too hard on my camera and the palm of my thumb has triggered the little flash toggle button. It's just, I've had to turn it off. It's the only way around it. So again, it's a workaround, but it's a pain that it should be an issue in the beginning. Okay, so most of my negatives really are more minor annoyances. There are workarounds, but again, they're a little bit frustrating, that's all. And if you're shooting with this camera all the time, every day, those frustrations, they add up. In terms of shooting performance, I don't find this camera limiting at all. So let's talk about some positives, some things I really like about this camera that I think you will like too. It really does continue to surprise me in bad conditions. Whether I'm shooting in a cave, which you can see a video of here, whether I'm shooting in bad weather using the rain cover on it, going under a waterfall, wherever I've shot anything, this camera's managed to pull at least one great shot out of it, and that amazes me. Shooting fast moving objects like birds, when I went to the gannet colony, video up here, this camera was outperforming my friend's X-T3, and his X-T3 is great. It's a great camera. I would love one, but I felt that when it came to bird shots with capturing those birds and getting them, he didn't get many photos out of that day, where I had hundreds of the things. I had struggled. I did a whole week of Instagram of gannets because I got so many good shots on this camera. It was really, really solid, really good, and it surprised me how good it was. Shooting at night, shooting sunrise, you know, the very beginning of the dawn. I did one video here on shooting dawn photography at a beach, and it was really good there too. In that low light scenario, I got some real amazing photos with some long shutter speed shots. Another thing I really like that I haven't really utilized in here is using this camera for a time lapse, using the built-in intervalometer. It's got an input, you can buy an intervalometer to take time lapse shots, but the built-in one works really well. I've used it once and it came out with amazing results. Now, let's talk about video. I'm a photographer. Video is new to me. I make videos about photography. This camera though, as a video shooter, it ticks all the boxes. The only way I think you're going to get better video results, ultimately, is if you go to a full frame sensor camera, something like the R6. The RP and the R, they have limitations this camera doesn't have when it comes to shooting video. This shoots full sensor 4K. This shoots 120 frames per second at 1080p. Full sensor, no crop. Its built-in stabilization is very good. I have used this on occasion to shoot B-roll without a gimbal using the enhanced stabilization, which is stabilization on top of stabilization, and it crops, but it looks great and it still shoots in 1080p in that mode, and even 4K in that mode. But if you're using something like a gimbal to stabilize, you can get full sensor video. It does all of that. It shoots 24 frames per second, 25 frames per second, 30, 50, 60, 120, 100. It covers all of the frames per second you would want. It has really solid dynamic range. If you're shooting in an ISO of 200 on this and using something like CineStyle, you can get some really nice video out of it with some decent dynamic range. Is it as good as a full frame sensor? No. Is it as good as some other cameras in terms of their dynamic range? I think it competes a lot more than people realize. Yeah, I've never taken a video on this camera and come away disappointed at all. It's worked great every time. I've never had it overheat. In 4K, I had the overheat warning come up once when I was filming in this studio on a very hot day, and I was recording for well over half an hour. Probably a good hour or so, and I had the warning come up, but it didn't stop. It kept recording. It just had the little thing flash on the screen telling me it was overheating a little bit. It was fine. It performed no problems. I think this shoots above its cost bracket. Like if you're the EOS R or EOS RP, this shoots better video. They crop for 120 frame per second slow-mo. They crop for 4K. This doesn't crop. So yes, it's a crop sensor, but you get to use the whole sensor, and it's a very good sensor. So at easily half the price of an EOS RP, this will be better for video. Button layout and ease of use. This is something I love on this camera. Reminds me a lot of my old AE1 program camera. Generally speaking, everything's here, everything's in reach. I don't have to really touch the back. Everything can be done on the top. Fact is, you can customize all of these buttons and dials. You can tell the camera what you want those buttons and dials to do. For example, the front dial, I changed that to be my f-stop rather than my shutter speed because I changed my f-stop a lot on the fly. My shutter speed, especially when I'm shooting video, I don't want to change it all the time or change it accidentally. So I changed the back dial, which would normally be your f-stop dial, to being my shutter speed. And for me, once you get used to that, just muscle memory, it works great. Press a button and you change the function of the dial. Press another button and you've got access to the menus directly. Everything is customizable on this camera, and that's something I really appreciate and really love. For every physical button, you can make it do what you want it to do. The touch screen is fantastic. It's full touch. Outside of the touch shutter, which I discussed as being something I hate with a passion. Quick menu gives me access to all the little bits and pieces that I might need while I'm shooting without having to go deep dive into all of the menus necessarily. But it's nice, it's responsive, it's easy to navigate. Focusing, it's great for focusing. I use it for focusing all of the time. It's so good. It's a great touchscreen. Battery life on this camera is actually really good. I often would go through maybe 2 batteries in an entire day. On days that I've gone for an entire walk, for a whole day, a tramp, and I've been taking photos and videoing it, I have generally gotten through the whole thing like a 4 or 5 hour tramp and still plenty of battery life. USB-C charging is fantastic. When I'm out and about, all I have to do is plug it in whenever I throw my camera into my camera bag, if I'm going to be, say, driving for an hour, and my camera gets charged. I don't have to swap the battery, I don't have to find the battery charger and plug that in the car necessarily. If you want to travel light and you just take your battery pack and one battery, you probably survive quite a bit. The number one reason that I bought this camera, ultimately, was the price. It was 1,600 New Zealand dollars when I bought it, brand new. I think that worked out to about $800 US. It came with a kit lens, it came with the adapter for EF lenses, it came with an EF 50mm nifty 50 lens, it came with the EVF, it came with a bunch of stuff, all for 1,600 bucks. When I looked at the Sony, I was looking at about $2,300 for just the body. The X-T3, which was the other one on my list, was about $3,000 at the time. Even now, those other cameras are still far more expensive than this one. And the M50, although it was cheaper, was only cheaper by about $300. But this is so much more capable than the M50 in terms of what it can actually do with, you know, lack of crop on video and things like that, higher megapixel photos. It's a real powerhouse in a small form factor for a really cheap price. So in conclusion, the M6 Mark II really lived up to my expectations. In fact, it exceeded them. It does everything. Slow motion, B-roll, 4K full sensor. Unless you need to shoot longer than 30 minutes at one time, in one go, in one take, this camera's not going to limit you in your filmmaking at all. For photography, Really, the only way you can improve this camera is to step up to full frame. Yes, if you want to just do video, I still think that the Sony, the a6600, is going to be a better camera for you. If you just want to shoot photography, another great choice is the Fuji X-T3 or X-T4, but they're significantly more expensive than this camera, that's why I think this camera really is a winner. Plus you've got access through an adapter to all of the EF range of glass, which is amazing glass. If you want to go up to L lenses, you can use them on this. You can get yourself a good speed booster and get the most out of those lenses too. Like, it's really not a very limiting camera in terms of photography. In fact, I think the sensor is over-spec'd for all of the lenses, all of the gear that you use with this. The sensor has never been pushed. So, if I went back in time, knowing everything that I know now, knowing the good, knowing the bad, would I still buy the M6 Mark II? Simple answer is yes. I think it's a fantastic camera. I think it's wildly overlooked. If you're looking for a camera that's going to serve all of your photography needs, as well as maybe launch your YouTube channel and last you for a very long time, I think the M6 Mark II is a smart choice. If you're really tight for cash, the M50 is still a great camera. You can still get amazing video and photos out of that camera. But I think the advancements in the M6 Mark II for just a few $100s more is going to give you so much more creative potential than that cheaper camera. There's of course the Sony question. The Sonys are great cameras. I'm not going to say that this is a better camera overall than say the a6600. However, if you've got that extra money to spend, then I would say you want to probably step up to a full frame camera over the a6600, because it's quite a bit more expensive than the M6 Mark II. So a camera that ticks almost all the boxes, that is somewhere in the middle price point wise, the M6 Mark II is really unrivaled. There's nothing there that I think could beat this camera. You've got to spend significantly more or make some fairly significant sacrifices on the capability of the camera to go either way on the price point scale. So there you go, that's a 1-year review of the M6 Mark II, the good and the bad. I hope this was useful to you. I hope you got something out of it and helped you make your decisions if you're still deciding what camera to buy. If you enjoyed this video, tap the like, hit the subscribe. If you'd like to help this channel out financially, you can go down below and find my affiliate links to this camera and all the other gear that I use. I get a little bit of a cut, costs you nothing extra, and that would help me out, help me keep this channel going and help me go on more adventures. More adventures to come too, so yeah. I'll see you guys real soon in the next video. Bye for now.